Hi everyone, welcome back to my stating, and today I will be reviewing the newly released novel by Christopher Paolini called To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. Now, Christopher Paolini probably doesn't need a big introduction, but I'll still give him a brief one. He entered the fantasy scene in early 2000s with his Inherited Cycle series. And he impressed a lot of people back then because when he wrote the series, and especially the first one, Aragon, he was still a teenager. And despite all that, his work have been translated into a lot of languages. I mean, I didn't read it in English for the first time, for example. And it also received an adaptation, a terrible one, but still. And it was a lot of people's first entry into the traditional fantasy. Since then, his work on the cycle has been criticized extensively for being super derivative of pop culture, of Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, mainly. But frankly, as much as I agree with those criticisms, he was like 15 or 16 when he wrote that, and you write what you know, right? So now, 10 plus years later, after publishing the last one in his fantasy series, he gets back with a sci-fi novel, a huge one, a thick one. And let's see what it's about. It's not a complex premise, so I'll be brief. We have our protagonist named Kira. She's a xenobiologist and she works on long-haul contract missions. She catalogs and studies biological flora and fauna on various planets. And as she is ending her current haul and making an important decision, personal important decision, she has to do a routine check on the site. And in the middle of that routine check, she uncovers an alien artifact, which leads to a massive discovery and a massive impact to the current galactic, I guess, workings and society, especially for humanity. Because it's not a spoiler, not a huge one, because it happens so early. The thing she uncovers is, of course, of alien nature, because the big aspect of this novel is first contact. And this alien life form is semi-alive and bonds with her and changes her life as well, forever. So in a sentence, think Speaker of the Dead, surprisingly, plus Venom, at least the symbiote aspect, and Mass Effect, but without the abundant aliens, just with humans and the other side. The good. The good is you can instantly see that the writer has matured in some aspects. The romance, for example, which is one of the aspects of the book, isn't as cringy as the one he wrote as a teenager, naturally. And the prose has improved quite a bit. It is apparent that Christopher Paolini has worked on his prose a lot, even though it can still be clunky, but it's not eye-rolling in any point. World building is quite good at parts. I like the aspects of small, even if they are derivative, details, where a lot of the people have various implants. And they don't use those implants for some crazy future tech controlling of various machines or what have you, a lot of the implants are quite utilitarian and very personal. For example, Kira uses her implants to record memories that are close to her. Memories like her boyfriend proposing to her, and she wants to save that memory forever. How she felt, how they looked, that's quite touching. Things of that nature. The small parts are good. Now the bad. I love a good science fiction doorstopper, but this was excessive in the way it was lacking major editing choices. Yes, it's almost 900 pages long, but I could easily see how you could remove like at least 1/5, like 200 pages, maybe even 180, and it would still retain cohesion. Because while the beginning of the book, where we're being introduced to the world, to the alien symbiote, to the changes it brings into Kira's life and the Galactic Society, the middle is just pumping on the brakes. It's a slog. It moves at a glacial speed, and it has these weird peaks and valleys in the progress of the overall plot. It's like it starts and stops, starts and stops, starts and stops. Something interesting begins to happen, and then we have a lull. Then again, something interesting starts to happen, and then we are at a lull. So I think actually in that problematic middle, this is where the world building buckles under its own weight, because you start to see some similarities with his previous work. If I were to be mean, I would say that when in Aragon, the dragon, Saphira, was sort of this internal voice of the protagonist, he takes that and uses it in the sci-fi setting where we have Kira, who learns to communicate with the sentient suit / symbiote that is of alien origin. And the dynamics are similar, even though naturally the symbiote is much more hostile and alien than a dragon. But the dynamic is quite similar. And when the writer spends time in the middle trying to wrestle with all that, it kind of falls apart. So my verdict would be, if I were to rate it as a full book, I would give it 2 out of 5 stars. It has a good premise, but it is bogged down by some unfortunate writing habits. I think a good editing pass could have made it into a very good book. Right now, it's just an okay book. I give it a passing grade, but that's just it. Actually, I would advise to, if you were to pick it up, to listen the audio version, because at first I started to read it on my Kindle, and when I was hitting the middle part that began to drag a lot, I switched to the audiobook, and the audiobook is narrated by the female Shepherd voice actor from Mass Effect, and it helps quite a bit. So there's that. Thank you for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and see you next time. Bye bye.